I've known Aaron Cohen since 2003 when I first started coming back to Century City. I have a son that was in Iraq for 2 tours, and this young man was constantly giving me encouragement when I was on pins and needles. He was in Iraq 2005, 2006, and when it was the worst. And Aaron Cohen is a patriot, and he's a national treasure in 3 countries, Bulgaria, Israel, and the United States. He is also very pro-military. He is a founding member of the Century City Chamber of Commerce, and he's been with the Chamber of Commerce since the beginning. He's a dear friend, and he's also somebody I very much look up to. And we're all looking forward to hearing you speak today, Aaron. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to one of the most amazing men I've ever met in my entire life, Aaron Cohen.
Usually I have a map of Europe, but unfortunately you can't see it. But anyway, my name is Aaron Cohen, and I believe in miracles. 2 miracles that I lived through. One of them, how 50,000 Jews in Bulgaria, unknown fact, because the communists squelched it, 50,000 Jews in Bulgaria about to be sent to the concentration camps to be exterminated like the rest of the 6 million. And the last moment, I can't tell you, was it by the grace of God, destiny, luck, whatever you want to call it, we were saved. Incredible. Very little known fact about the story is because the communists squelched it. They did not want the clergy, the king, they wanted only the people to get the credit for it. Well, there was something that happened in Bulgaria that happened nowhere else. The clergy, the people, and the king interceded on our behalf. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Bulgaria. We all know where Europe is, right? Okay. Now Bulgaria is situated as follows. On the north, Bulgaria is divided between Romania and Bulgaria is the Danube River. On the west is Yugoslavia and Macedonia. South is Turkey and Greece. In the east is the Black Sea. We heard enough about the Black Sea lately. Now I have to tell you a little bit about my family. First of all, Bulgaria was a kingdom. And one very fascinating thing about the Bulgarians, they're always very tolerant of their minorities. If you can imagine, very little known fact, practically unknown. 15th century, if you recall, the king and queen of Spain expelled all the Jews from Spain. And were the languishings on the shores of Spain and Portugal, Sultan Bayezid sends his flotilla, sends his ships, picked up the Jews and brought them to Turkey. So that's the way my family came originally. They called Sephardic Jews. Sfarad in Hebrew means Spain. Sephardic Jews means Spanish Jews. So that's the way our family wound up in Turkey, and they moved inland as merchants, and that's the way they wound up in Bulgaria. There are 50,000 Jews in Bulgaria. And one very unknown fact is that one of the last kings of Bulgaria falls in love with the daughter of a Jewish merchant. He sends his queen away, he marries this girl, and her name was Sarah. The Bulgarians very affectionately called her Sarka. She becomes Queen of Bulgaria, becomes Christian Orthodox, and her name was changed to Theodora. Under her reign, there were incredible prosperity there. She brought literature, music, very well. And I don't know why it's not a known fact. We know about Queen Esther, but we never know about Sarka or Queen Theodora. So again, I'll reiterate, always the Bulgarians were very tolerant of their minorities. About 50,000 Jews live there, Armenians, Greeks, Turks, Gypsies, and incredible. They lived very well together there. And I have to tell you a little bit about my family. I was born in Macedonia, on the corner of Macedonia and Bulgaria. My mother was right in the middle of second largest city in Bulgaria, was called Plovdiv, comes from the word Philippopolis. It was the headquarters of Philip the Macedonians, which was the father of Alexander the Macedonian. Now, on my mother's side and my father's side family, I have to tell you a very quick background. Anyone that's here by any chance have seen the movie War Horse? No? Okay. On my father's family, they were very tough homes. They lived in Gorno Jumaya, which is right on the Macedonian border, and they were into horses, tobacco, and furs. Get that? Jews and horses? No problem. That's the way they grew up. So, my father, for his bar mitzvah, we all know what bar mitzvah is, right? For his bar mitzvah, they gave him a beautiful Arabian horse. And that was just before World War I. Man, he loved that horse. He slept with the horse. He bathed that horse. He loved that horse. I mean, because the whole family, they were into horses, tobacco, furs, tough hombres. Macedonians were very, very tough people. You made a joke about the Macedonians, they hung you. Simple, no problem. So he loved that horse so much, the whole family were, very together. You can imagine my grandmother, alayhi salam, had 13 children. When she had her last child, her firstborn gave birth to her first child. So they're nursing babies together, okay? Different times. And they were very close family. Again, now my father goes through town just before World War I, and the general of the garrison spots the horse, confiscates that horse. Breaks my father's heart. He worked lasted about 2 or 3 years. He went all over the country with the thousands of horses of the cavalry. He found this horse and he brought him home. He did the same thing without radio. We had only people that were the radio, and the Nazis confiscated. He found the radio. That was in him. So I have to tell you now about the opposite of my mother's family. They were in the second largest city, like I said, Plovdiv, and they're totally different. Urban, erudite. They sent my saintly mother after World War I to college, and she became a teacher. My other uncle, they sent to Vienna to study pharmacy. And my uncle, the third uncle, was president of the Franco-Bulgarian Bank. Can you imagine? Anyway, totally different. Now, I told you the Macedonians very tough hombres. And as my father grew up, they liked my father, and they wanted him to become their controller, bookkeeper. Well, my father couldn't do that. The reason he couldn't do that, and later on you'll find out, he had friends in other parties, and especially his best friend. Later on I found out that he was so instrumental in saving us, and he was deputy prime minister. So that's the difference between the two families. Now, he marries my mother, brings her to Gorno Jumaya, and lovely life. Macedonians want him to become their controller. Okay, he couldn't do that. He picks up the family, and he brings them to Plovdiv, where my mother came originally. Now, lovely city, Plovdiv is situated between 5 hills and very picturesque. And again, we moved into like a duplex. Upstairs lived a retired family, enormously wealthy, and downstairs we lived there. I was 5 years old. The landlady and the landlord, retired people, prominent family. If you can imagine, She had a steam bath and luxury. Today they don't have that. So I just want to share the enormous wealth. I'm 5 years old, they retired, so they kind of adopted me. They bathed me, I ate with them. It was Disneyland. Well, 2 years later, their daughter was married to the Consul General of Bulgaria to Germany. He finished his stint, and we had to vacate the place. And my mother was heartbroken. We moved into a place, now again to show the diversity. On this side, there were 4 apartments. On this side were the landlady and the landlord, and they had 3 children, and one of them was my age. Underneath there lived a Turkish family. Underneath us lived the Armenian family. You saw the kids play on the street, you would know which one was which. Again, I reiterate how well integrated the society was. One quick thing I had to say, that the Bulgarians, in the 15th century, 16th century, they fell under the dominance of the Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire extended at that time through Europe all the way to Vienna. The Bulgarians rebelled against Turkish. They wanted to have their freedom. And at that time, Sultan Bayezid sent his most elite group to squelch the rebellion. Churchill writes about them with great respect. They call the Bashibuzuk, elite. What happens at that time, as the Bulgarian about to lose, to be squelched? On the map I'll show you that at that time, the Tsar of Russia, Bayezid comes all the way to Bulgaria, helps the Bulgarians liberate themselves, and goes back. Tsar Nikolai. If you happen to visit at that time Bulgaria at any time, you go into the capital of Bulgaria, you'll see a huge monument to Tsar Nikolai, which they call the Liberator. I need you to remember that, because that later will come to play. How the Bulgarians will always be grateful to Russians has nothing to do if they're communists, if they're Tsars, if they're whatever it is. They will never lift a finger against Russia. Very important to remember that. So, when they get liberated, the Bulgarian people did something which never happened anywhere else. They established a constitution by which they gave equal rights to all their citizens. Gypsies, Armenians, Jews, whatever, Greeks, they are all equal citizens. No place else it happened. So that's the way we grew up. Now we go back, as I'm growing up with the Bulgarian family. They took me with them to church. What's a nice Jewish boy doing in Bulgarian church? No problem. I grew up there, and we were so together. I wouldn't eat at home anything. I was a lousy kid. But I'll go downstairs with Armenian people. They had 2 children. Takui would put a big pot of tripe, and while Munda is crying upstairs, they see how I'm with the other kids, sticking my fingers in and eating. You eat with other kids, it's okay. So again, I just want to reiterate how equal the people were there. You owned and you saw how the kids played on the street. You would know which one is which. Simple as that. Now, my father became a representative of a very large import-export company. And he would travel a lot. My mother, I grew up with her because my father was traveling, and it took me, and I added all to my mother, my appreciation of art, music, ballet. My father, because he traveled a lot, to show his affection, I would work in the store in the summer, and one Monday would send me to camp. Now, when we send here children to camp, what we do? We want them to be strong, lose weight. In Bulgaria, they send us to gain weight. I was skinny like this. Imagine that. Anyway, so my father used to say, now, I would work 1 month in the store where my father was representative there, and I would be selling china and crystal to the ladies, 8 years old, 9 years old. Always had that love for selling. my father, to show his affection, because he traveled, when I was 8 years old, he would take me on one-day trip, 9 years old, 2-day trip, 3-day trip. And I used to love to go on those trips, especially going through tunnels. Figure it out, okay? So it was a lovely life. Now, I'm 9 years old, going on 10 years old, and the owner of the store had just come back from Germany on a bar trip. And he comes in and I can hear how he tells my father, we are in trouble. He was in Berlin the night when they have the Crystal Night. If you know anything about it, that was when the Nazis became in power and they went through Berlin and they broke every single piece of glass with the Jews, and then of course the rest of it started. And I'll never forget, here I'm 9 years old and I can hear all that, and then pretty soon Nazis begin, and and I showed them about how they conquered Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, France. Tell you something very quickly again about the Bulgarian. It was a kingdom. The Bulgarian king at that time was half German and Bulgarian, beloved by the people, loved his people, absolutely king of the people. I did very quickly how progressive they were. My saintly mother's cousin was lady in waiting for the queen. Okay, give you again about how people were treated there. But as the Germans began to sweep up the whole of Europe, the Bulgarian king, there was no way that he would fight him. He was half German. He came from a very prominent German family. His father was full-blooded German. They were the Kabutz, the Hohenzollerns, and the Habsburgs, three very prominent German family. Now, when he sees how the whole of Europe falls under the dominance and under the capture of the Nazis, he joined the Axis. Axis, I forgot to tell very quickly, is the term that was used, the treaty between Germany, Japan, and Italy. So he joins the Nazis, he joined the Nazi, the Axis, and Disneyland was over. And when I heard how the owner of the store tells my father, we got a problem. So being that they became part of the Nazis, part of the Axis, they formed a very, very strong Nazi government, fascist government. Disneyland was over. The first thing they did, as soon as they became part of the Axis, they instituted the harshest measures against the Jews. We were put in a ghetto. My uncles had beautiful places they had to move in, and it was over. We had to wear Jewish stars. They were completely changed. And as much as the Nazis prevailed, something happened in Bulgaria with the harshest measures that they instituted against the Jews. And very quickly, as soon as the king joined the Axis, he was given two provinces which were always in dispute between Yugoslavia and Turkey and Greece. So Thrace and Macedonia, completely they were given there, and there were 20,000 Jews that they were not citizens that lived there. Just want you to remember that. So now, as the harshest measures were instituted against the Jews, something happened that never happened anywhere else. The clergy, saints, two especially, the whole of 10 metropolitans, which were like cardinals, they got together and they issued a proclamation, went to especially two metropolitans, the one from Sofia, the capital, and one from Plovdiv, where I lived, together with Deputy Prime Minister Pesce, which happened to have been my father's best friend, which I didn't know. They formed a delegation and went to the king, especially the clergy, said to the king, it's not in the Bulgarian psyche for us to persecute our own people. They're part of us. You tell me what else has happened. Nowhere. And I've been talking about it for the past many years. By the way, my first presentation I made was at the Rotary Club in Grove, and this is one doctor took me to the museum, and that's when I've been speaking in the museum. So I owe my speaking to the Rotary Club. So they were so strongly opposed to these harsh measures that the king couldn't do very much. And I'll never forget, while all these things is happening, the harshest measure instituted against us. My father lost his job. The president of a bank, forget it. We moved like in a ghetto. I was 10 years old, and I had to wear the Jewish star. Under the orders, if I took off the Jewish star, I could be shot on sight. So I would take the Jewish star, I always had guts, take the Jewish star, and go across town, stand together with the Bulgarian, so I can get bread and bring to the family. That's the way I was growing up. Again, in the meantime, Hitler declares war on Russia. So he summons the king to Berlin, being that he's his ally, and he's asking two things of the king. I cleaned out automatically all the Jews of Europe. There's still 50,000 Jews. They're there, uncleaned out. I'm sending the best person there that can expedite to finish them. And the next thing I want is brigade of Bulgarian soldiers. Hitler had declared war on Russia. And I want a brigade of Bulgarian soldiers to go and fight against the Russians. Never happens. What did I tell you about the Russians? So what it does, now again, there were 20,000 Jews that they were in Macedonia. The king summoned to Germany again, and this time the word is out. There was a shouting match between Hitler and the king, and he said, stop stalling. I want the brigade of Bulgarian soldiers, and I want the damn Jews to be finished. Again, at that time, while the king is in Germany, the Nazi and the neo-fascist government takes upon themselves, and they issued an order to get the 20,000 Jews that they were entrusted in Macedonia to be shipped out, and they were. Now, instead of 20,000, there were only 11,000, 10,000. So while the king is in Bulgaria, and so while the king is in Germany, the fascist government takes upon themselves and gets us all and puts us all in warehouses, and us, they put us in a schoolyard, ready to be shipped out. The king is still in Germany while this thing is happening. At that time, the Deputy Prime Minister Peshev, again, my friend, with the clergy, they formed a delegation, and the king is back. He went back to the king, and he said, you can't do that. Well, while we are assembled with our little belongings in the schoolyard, at that time, Metropolitan Hero of Lviv has a few of his monks. They pick him up over the fence, and he says, children, I will save you. I will prostrate myself across the railroad tracks. You're going nowhere. They have to go over my dead body to take you. You tell me any place on earth that this happens. And the communists did a great job by squelching that. God forbid, the clergy or the clergy or the king should get the product. Anyway, so while we were waiting there, the Russians were coming down. The Nazis were leaving. And at that time, the miracle happened. I don't want to use the name of the Lord anyway, but was it God's will? Was it destiny? Was it lady luck? Combination of all. Well, the king dies. Picture of health. A week before he was dead, he climbed the tallest mountain at that time in Bulgaria, the Vitusha. He was poisoned. He kept refusing, kept stalling, and that's what happened to him. So now the Russians are coming down. Nazis are getting defeated. The king is dead. And until today, we don't know exactly. It was lady luck, it's the grace of God, whatever it was. The chief of police stands up and he says, Jews, go home. Your lives have been spared. I will reiterate again. No place on earth. Well, never mind, I'm not going to even say that. But I said what the clergy all over the world stood by, and there were places in Europe where the clergy turned the Jews into the Nazis, calling them Christ killers. In Bulgaria, they stood and they fought for us, and here is the story that I have to tell you. So the chief of police stands up and he says, Jews, go home. Your lives have been spared. Shortly after that, while this was all happening, there was a movement in Europe, which was called the Kinder Transport, or the Youth Aliyah. So 38 children, with me, myself, put us on a train. My saintly mother running along the train, and they sent us at that time with British papers, British passports, legitimated to Palestine. And I was 13, going on 14. And two of the best years of my life I spent, we were in quarantine for a week and then distributed us in agricultural settlements called Kabutz Urim. So for 2 years, we worked a half a day, and a half a day we studied. And I had great affinity for animals, so after I finished studying, I would always go where the animals were there together. And he knew, and he would let me ride a mare which was pregnant all over every afternoon, all over the orchard. And that was a beautiful life that we spent there. So that's my story, very abbreviated because it only I have short time. Now, very quickly, I have to say that my saintly mother, every time she would mention about these two clergymen, these two saints, she beseeched me that I made a promise to her that I will pray one day at their graves on behalf of our family and on behalf of our people. So 20 years ago, 25 years ago, my wife and I went to Bulgaria. And I requested an audience with the successor of the Metropolitan, with the Cardinal, that was so instrumental in saving our lives. And it couldn't be nicer. Immediately, they were buried in the monastery, which is called the Monastery of Bachkova. So by the time we went to the monastery, he made arrangements, so they called the head of the monastery Iguman. And he received us beautifully, and had lunch for us. And of course, they know how to cook lamb. But a bottle of arak didn't hurt the lamb either. So I requested from him and said, could you please give us 2 or 3 of your monks to perform a memorial for these two saints. Both of them, Metropolitan Kirill and Metropolitan Stefan, are buried right in that monastery. And he said, absolutely. So we go in there, and the place was packed. And the minute they began celebrating, the minute they began their memorial, you could drop a pin in that place. And of course, I had brought flowers, and I got them anyway, we thanked them. And I wrote in the book of the monastery, in the purest of Hebrew biblical sentence, I said, Neder nadarti v'kiyamti oto. An oath I have given to my saintly mother, and I am fulfilling it today. So I was done. There was one more thing for me to do, is to pray at the grave of the king, which is buried with the most famous monastery in Europe, kings go there. Kings, it's called the monastery of Riva. So I go to the igumen and I ask the same thing. Could you give us a couple of your monks to perform a memorial for His Majesty? And tell me how well versed. He looked at me and he says, no. And I was taken aback. He says, why not? You don't need an intermediary. You Jews have your own memorial. It's called the Kaddish. You know the Kaddish? I wish the hell I didn't know it, because I know it. And that's the memorial that you recite. It's part of a family, or friends, or anybody is married. I know it by heart. I wish I didn't. Anyway, so I was with the representative of the United States State Department and my wife. We went in there, and I started to recite it. Of course, he said he was part Jewish, okay? So anyway, I started reciting it, never finished it. Got all choked up, went on my knees, and I thanked him, and that's my story. So any questions now, if you have? We have time for some
So
questions?
we do have a few minutes for questions. So some questions.
Aaron, how many years were you in Israel before you came to the U.S.?
8 years, 9 years, my most formative years. I still have nightmares at night when I feel how within 24, 48 hours, how the Arab Legion didn't overtake us. They were superb soldiers, British trained, British equipped. I fought the Egyptians, they're okay, but they were not the soldiers. Now, I lost a lot of my friends on the road to Jerusalem by the Jordanian soldiers. My kid brother fought the Jordanians, fought the Arab Legion, and he captured one officer, and I have his headdress in my office, called the kafia. That was a miracle.
That's the 48 war you're talking about?
I'm sorry?
That's 1948 that you're talking about?
1948. It was how 5 armies attacked us, and we had nothing. Anyway, tell you very quickly, I got some. We were besieged in the desert, okay, with the Egyptian army. And finally, they were able to smuggle to us one machine gun. I had the machine gun. I could take that apart, blindfolded, put it together. So at night, there were 11 settlements that Ben Gurion wanted to settle the desert. So they would, in a tender, in a pickup, we'd go from settlement to settlement, so I can shoot the machine gun at night, so people, especially dark, they would think that we had that power. And eventually you got more equipment. But that was a miracle, if there was one. Any other questions? Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.